Hi, it's Grace Gooley. Welcome to another episode of Around the Ozarks Community Corner. And as the cold approaches, there's a lot of people in our community seeking warmth. So Community Partnership of the Ozarks has started their crisis cold weather shelter season. And I am here with Melody Shuck and Emily Fessler from Community Partnership of the Ozarks. Thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, absolutely. I want to talk about, let's first talk about CPO as a whole. What is CPO? Let's just talk about you guys.
Yeah, Community Partnership of the Ozarks, we've been around for 25 plus years. And really what we do is we help build resilient children, healthy families, and strong neighborhoods and communities. So we're a local nonprofit, and we really focus on 4 different areas: early childhood, mental health and prevention, communities and neighborhoods, and affordable housing and homeless prevention. And so we do a lot of things through collaboration and working with partners. And what I like to say is we're really trying to fill in the gaps to connect people with what they need in our community as the trusted nonprofit that we've been doing this work for many, many years.
All right. Now knowing who CPO is, how do these crisis cold weather shelters fit in? Like, how are you guys helping people who are experiencing homelessness in these colder months?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that we do through the Affordable Housing and Homeless Prevention Division at CPO, as Melody was talking about, is looking to fill those gaps. And so a lot of what we do is through coalition and coalition building. And so crisis cold weather shelters were started many years ago by East Sunshine Church of Christ, at the time just to open their doors because they were seeing folks on the street. And today they are still one of our main crisis cold weather shelters. They're a 50-bed men's shelter. And then what we've done, we stepped in originally to help with transportation assistance, and it's sort of grown. And so crisis cold weather shelters operate a little different than some of your year-round emergency shelters. And so zoning is really difficult to get a emergency shelter established within city. You're battling a lot of things around NIMBYism. You're also battling, of course, just regulatory zoning practices. And there's some updates to that, which we're really excited to see come out of the city. But one of the big challenges was crisis cold weather shelters, and how do we get churches or businesses to be able to open their doors. So Community Partnership stepped in with community partners and city staff and developed something called the Declaration of Housing and Economic Calamity Ordinance, which is an ordinance we recently just got re-upped. We re-up it about every 3 years, and it allows for those types of locations, churches, businesses, organizations that wouldn't typically be able to be zoned as an emergency shelter, be able to open during those cold winter months. And then we have a collaborative committee called the Crisis Cold Weather Shelter Planning Committee that works year-round in preparation for these cold winter months so that we can get folks inside safely.
Yeah. So along with that, you guys have started the initiative Workplace to Warm Place, that campaign. So what inspired that, and what would it look like for a local business to be involved with that?
Yeah. So it was sort of inspired because all of those crisis cold weather shelters, because of that Declaration of Housing and Economic Calamity, have to follow certain protocols through the city, through the fire department. And part of that requires having 2 overnight shelter volunteers. And if we don't have those, then those shelters cannot open their doors. And so what we see is typically around, as we get through towards January, February, those volunteers that regularly, consistently are showing up to shelters each and every night to open those doors get burnt out after doing that for a long period of time. And especially as we get into the colder months, it just gets very exhausting. And so the volunteer fatigue is real. So with that volunteer fatigue, we were always looking, how do we, prevent these shelters from closing and be able to continue opening their doors? And we had a lot of interest from groups in years past about wanting to do group volunteering, but it wasn't something that we could quite figure out the logistics of at the time. But through some dedicated funding through the city of Springfield, through their marijuana tax, they have committed annually to funding the Crisis Cold Weather Shelter Program, which we are forever grateful for. And so with that, it sort of allowed us to kind of create a more sustainable model and really build a foundation. And so that's where we kind of took it to Melody and we said, okay, how can we build a campaign where these organizations, these businesses can bring their staff to this type of initiative, and what would that look like? And so that's sort of how it was born.
Yeah, it's important to note that even though now we are getting some funding from the marijuana sales tax, Crisis Cold Weather Shelter is volunteer based. So we wouldn't be able to open any of these shelters if it weren't for the volunteers. And that's why it's so important to get out this message to our community, because as you know, Springfield and the Ozarks is such a wonderful, heart-driven community base. And there are so many people that want to help. And when you see people out on the sidewalk and it's freezing cold outside, these people need somewhere to go or they might die. I mean, the cold weather here is serious. And so that's why the Crisis Cold Weather Shelters open, what's the degree mark here?
32 degrees.
32 degrees. When it hits 32 degrees, they decide to open them. But they can't operate without volunteers. And so the Workplace to Warm Place initiative is just a way that you can get some people together and be like, let's do something good. Let's volunteer. Let's give back to our community if we're needed. So they're just on an on-call needed as an as-needed basis.
Yeah. So on the subject of volunteers, what does it look like to be a volunteer? Like, could you give me an example of like what do you see as a volunteer whenever you're there, and like what does that bring to the table if you do volunteer?
So volunteering looks a little different. Each shelter is sort of unique in the population that they get to serve. There are shelters that serve just men, just women, all gender shelters. We even have a pet shelter. So if you like pets, if you're a big dog person, there is no shortage of dogs to play with at that shelter. But each of them look a little different depending on what volunteer shift you're on. And so there are volunteers that are for sure needed overnight, or those shelters could not operate and open. But there's also volunteer shifts in the early evening, early morning. So depending on the shelter, there's hospitality. You're just providing, hot chocolate, coffee, granola bars, snacks to people who are coming in. As Melody talked about, I mean, our winters are really brutal. And sometimes if these folks aren't at a daytime center where they can stay warm, these are people coming in, who are freezing to the bone. And so it's just providing kindness and, being able to talk with people is a really big deal. And then those overnight volunteers, you actually get to sleep. I think sometimes people hear overnight and they realize that I have to be up for 12 hours.
That's what I would have
thought. No, it's not a third shift. It's not a third shift. And so you're always paired with another volunteer overnight. And so you guys can take turns. One person just needs to be awake and the other person can sleep during that time. And it's really just, it's fire watch is what it is. That's why we have it, is if a fire were to break out, is a human awake to see it.
To handle it. Yeah. So that's fair. That's fair.
And we do provide training. And so if you do sign up and you want to participate and decide to give back, you go through training and watch some videos so that you are fully prepared to volunteer at any one of the shelters.
Yeah. All right. So if anyone's watching, whether it's a business, a church group, whoever it is, and they want to sign up, they want to donate, they want to volunteer, where would they go? What's the next step?
They can go to cpozarks.org/CCWS for Crisis Cold Weather Shelter. And on there, we have all of the information regarding Crisis Cold Weather Shelter. So how folks can access them on shelter nights, which shelters are open, which ones still have beds available. And then if they scroll down, they'll find, the link to be able to sign up to volunteer, or if they are a business, a church organization, information on that new campaign where they can connect for more information on that. And then if they're interested in donating, what the process would be there. So it's all laid out for them on there.
We'd just like to thank everybody who is a partner of ours and our sponsors. A special thank you to the City of Springfield. We couldn't do it without them, and City Utilities. They're just really supportive in this work that we do. It's just a great relationship. And then all of the churches and buildings that we use. This is truly a community effort, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without our community.
It's amazing to see our community working together for what matters most, which is just helping each other. So if you want to be part of the Workplace to Warm Place initiative, or if you want to learn more about crisis cold weather shelters, you can go to cpozarks.org/ccws for more information.